You're listening to the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt. It's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, eliminate chaos and maximize profit. I've got a great interview for you today with an old friend of mine, Russ Little. He is a senior vice president at Jones Lang LaSalle, and he is a professional buyer of construction services. Over his 20-plus year career, this guy has probably been involved with sourcing easily hundreds of millions of dollars worth of construction services on the commercial side. Super sharp guy, and you're going to learn a lot from this interview, including some things like the concept of relationship mining. We talk about one common mistake that is often made when people start with a new client or they change jobs and start working with a new company. Russ talks about a concept that's new to me, this concept of coopetition and why it's a good thing. You'll hear about some changes that Russ would suggest to contractors who want to be more successful. And remember, Russ has worked with hundreds of contractors over his career, and you want to listen to his advice. We talk about some of the most challenging aspects of working inside very large client organizations. We also spend some time talking about one particularly difficult employee that Russ managed about 10 years ago, and the most difficult situation that this person caused for Russ. Russ also explains how an apparent failure turned out to be a setup for later success and a red flag that it's time for you to have a talk with an employee. Lots of great stuff, wide-ranging conversation. Russ is a super sharp guy, one of the greatest folks I've ever worked with, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this. I've got a couple of words from my sponsors and some resources I want to share with you before we get into that interview. All right, let's talk about a form of chaos I know you've experienced before, a bad customer review. Did you know it only takes one negative review to stop a potential job in its tracks? Your reputation takes years to build. Don't let one review change that. From Yelp to Google to Facebook, GoSite helps you manage and generate reviews all in one easy-to-use place. Research shows your customers need to see at least 30 positive reviews in order to trust your brand, and top-ranking businesses on Google have an average of 40 reviews. So, a job well done and a happy customer aren't just revenue, they're marketing opportunities. GoSite makes it easy to build your credibility and authority as a construction leader by automatically asking your already happy customers for a new review with just one click. Take control of your customer reviews and turn your 5-star success into more revenue with GoSite's easy-to-use mobile app. Get started for free at gosite.com/podcast. That's GOSITE.com/podcast. How many hours have you spent creating and chasing endless invoices? Is your cash flow hurting because of delayed or, even worse, non-payment situations? Doing business the old-fashioned way is wasting your time and money. Take control and get paid on time for your hard work with Approval. Approval is an easy-to-use payment management tool for milestone-based projects. It creates an interactive payment flow designed specifically to help contractors like you automate contract terms and better control your accounts receivable. So how does Approval do that? As a contractor, you start by setting up the project scope and timeline, divided by clear project milestones. Then, for each milestone, you decide if it should be paid up front or at completion. You can even advance and commit funds at the beginning of a milestone, which will get released as soon as work is completed. Your client can then view and accept the project, approve each milestone at a time, and make payments all in one place. Now you have accountability to refer back to so that you can reduce errors, avoid project delays, and mitigate risk by connecting each transaction to project milestones. Approval really is a win-win situation. The pay-per-milestone model allows contractors to get paid faster, all while providing homeowners with a better experience and more trust so you can win more jobs. Get started today. Visit withapproval.com to see more. and click Request Demo to get in touch. That's withapproval.com. All right, here we go. Enjoy my wide-ranging conversation with my good friend, Russ Little. All right, Russ, welcome to the podcast. We'll get into how we know each other in just a few minutes, but let's talk about this. You have a unique vantage point of working with lots of contractors, having bought millions of dollars worth of construction services in your career. What are one or two changes that you would like to see contractors make in order to be more successful working on your type of projects?
Yeah, it's a good question, Todd. I think first and foremost for me is I really want contractors to know their value, right? And that's beyond your bid value. But I think when we contract, millions and millions, to your point, thousands of projects, right? It's really easy to turn that into a commodity business. And I think, considering cost pressures that are coming, potential changes from, the presidential policies, contractors are uniquely positioned when you put your owner hat on, right, to be able to read the sea of change that's coming. It's really easy to look at data and charts, research, right, to think about from an owner's perspective, what should be changing in 6, 8, 12 months. But I think when you're actually in the field, boots on the ground, buying out subs, you're able to bring a unique perspective that really progressive owners and the type of owners you want to work for anyway, truly value, right? So what are the alternative materials that you could bring to that job spec, right? How are you experimenting with technology? If you get your company thinking in terms of being more than a transactor of service and really being a firm that can bring a relationship and a differentiator, I think that's the biggest change that I would hope to see out of the construction business. It's really easy to just get focused on the numbers and the schedule and delivering, but I think the really unique and poised for the long-term companies are considering that relationship piece.
Yeah, so let's talk about those differentiators. What differentiates a contractor? What makes a general contractor or a subcontractor really stand out to you? What are things they either do or they don't do? What are some indicators that you've got that somebody is different?
Yeah. So in our world, it is, on the owner side, it is a lot of volume, right? And so from a volume, because of that volume, it's about driving consistency, minimizing noise, right? Because a lot of the owner's time really is spent working within their own, complicated organization, right? And so reducing the amount of time and energy it takes to deliver a project is in the benefit of that owner side, right? And so for companies like JLL, we would like to help, provide that value. Thought I might need to redo that one. What I'm trying to get to is, we want to get less time spent worrying about paperwork, right, and filling out all the, all the cells on an Excel file, right, and really have the contractor, come to the table with, true value changing ideas from what they were handed from a design partner, right? Or being willing to come to the owner and say, hey, your specs are the reason we're seeing cost increases, or your inability to, lock in on a scope is why the schedule continues to slip. Like, that's what I want to talk about, right? And it's less about, can you beat your competition on the sub market, right? Because at the end of the day, that's only gonna help so much, right? You're only going to be able to wring out pennies so many times before the owner will transition to a new penny, and they'll need to look for something else.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not just as you said, the transaction. It's let's go upstream from the transaction. And to me, I'm always impressed with someone who's less focused on how they're going to build something and where the crane pad will be and where the buck hoist will be and the logistics plan. It's good to see somebody that has a firm grasp on that, but that's sort of like table stakes, especially on commercial projects. But when somebody comes along and says, hey, I think there's a better HVAC system for your project, or I think there's a big operational flaw. I think we need to fix some things before we complete the design because I don't think this is going to work for you. Or I see an opportunity here. And when contractors bring those sort of things to the table, that's really valuable. And
right.
It feels to me, having been a contractor and been on the owner's side, it seems like some people they put brackets around themselves and they say, well, that's not my job, or that's not what the owner wants me to do. What you were going to say something. What was that?
Yeah, I think that's true. The other piece that just comes to mind when hearing you kind of walk through that, Todd, is like understand that the owners are outtasking all of this work because for the most part they don't have that expertise, right? When you get into crane pads and serious construction means and methods, that's the 1 in 100, right? From an owner that understands that, or even quite honestly cares about that, right? They're contracting with an owner's rep or directly to a GC to manage that piece. The ownership side, especially on the piece that I'm part of, right? Corporate solutions, it's a volume-based repair and maintenance work, right? It's pretty rare we're going vertical in a tower, right? It's more often we're doing programmatic rinse and repeat type work where you're replacing that rooftop unit 150 times in a year, right? And so I would encourage, contractors looking to get into that space is how do you think about the work in more of a manufacturing sense, right? How do you make it more efficient to repeat that work over and over and over? How can you scale that either with resources or, agreements on the sub-market, agreements on the equipment manufacturing side? And so, it all, unfortunately for me, it always boils back to that relationship piece because at the end of the day, again, those owners aren't buying, they're not buying the end product, right? They're really buying the full life cycle of what it takes to implement a capital plan. And that could be, 1,000 parking lot pavements or parking lot repaving jobs, or it could be, 500 major multi-million-dollar greenfield builds, right?
Yeah, and I want to come back to relationships and specifically this topic, this term you brought up of relationship mining. But before we go any further, talk about what kind of work you do, where you work, and just give us a little bit of background on where you're at and how you got there. Yeah.
So I lead the project operations side of JLL's corporate solutions business. And that side is really an extension of our clients, right? Folks may be more familiar with kind of the developer side of real estate services company like JLL or, developer arm of a, commercial construction development company. We're really more out-task in-house labor, right, for a client. And that could be anything from providing project managers to deliver the work to, my current engagement is really more end to end, right? We're charged with the capital planning of, multi-million-dollar annual plan to, plan the design and construction of that multi-million-dollar plan to close out move management and everything kind of in between. So, having that kind of end-to-end visibility, responsibility, right, it makes it a pretty complex engagement with multiple different arms. So there's kind of the pre-construction planning and development piece, right? So all the client standards, the site location, if they're building new, if they're exiting, that kind of strategy piece goes into the work that we do. And then kind of that core, what folks are probably more accustomed to of, design, build, pre-con services, contract with contractors and designers. We oversee that across the country. And so, how I got there is a story of, kind of growing up in design and construction, real estate. Got a mechanical engineering degree from NC State University. Went from that into designing mechanical systems with a small consulting firm in Raleigh, and then moved into another kind of consulting firm, and had really kind of questioned where my future was there, because they weren't growing. My manager was, I think, the head of the department for the past 15 years, and he had 20 years before he was gonna move on. And I had a unique opportunity to move closer to my family, and opportunity with JLL came about, which was focused on sustainability and process improvement of project operations. So very similar role to what I am today, but a little bit more focused on sustainability. And so I've spent the last 14 years or so with JLL in a couple of different capacities, from project operations to leading a project account team, responsible for a couple $100 million for a client, and now back head of a operations group at another client of JLL's.
So JLL, just to provide a little background, that's Jones Lang LaSalle. And for people who aren't familiar, JLL is one of the largest real estate and, frankly, financial firms in the world. Just looking at some quick statistics to give you an idea, annual revenue of $16 billion in 80 countries, 91,000 employees, big company. Very large company. So very different from a small business. But what are some of the most challenging aspects of working inside a large client organization like that? What are some things that either continue to surprise you, or they're just the biggest challenges? And then I want to make sure and get to relationship mining as soon as we talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, impressive stats, Todd. I think we've grown about 100 and some percent since you left JLL. So I don't know if there's a correlation there or not. But,
well, you have to get rid of some of the dead wood before things can grow.
That's right. So to your question about large client organizations, I mean, this is not unique to JLL, right? But I would say my experience, because I have been in that kind of environment throughout my career at JLL, has been really helping those. My role has been in helping those clients operationalize their vision, right? I talked about it earlier. They're coming to a JLL or our competitors to really try and figure out how do you do the day to day, right? They have an aspirational vision. They're struggling with how to do the day to day. And the easy part is to take that order, right, and to just deliver projects and make sure you scope, schedule, budget, hit the targets. And I think the challenging part is is trying to get from that transactional role to an advisory role, right? Within a client organization, you do that through, reliable promises, creating some, shared consciousness or shared vision. And eventually you get to that client to say, I'm not always saying yes, right? You want to get to where you're asking why, and it becomes more of a discussion. So whether that organization's, incredibly flat from a hierarchical standpoint or, siloed, it's really difficult to find one singular change leader in a client organization like that. And that's what you have to have, right? To be able to deliver day to day. We have hundreds of project managers on our team who are getting thousands of ideas around what the right next step might look like, right? And without that one singular point within the client organization, they can get really disjointed. They can get very regionally focused, and clients are paying JLL a lot of money to be consistent. And so it kind of erodes our ability to be consistent. Balancing those stakeholders is really the hardest part, right? And really, it's in my experience, it's nearly impossible if the client is looking at you as a vendor. So JLL's role is really, or the role I play today is really kind of the conductor between the client of the audience who's asking for, a certain type of music, and the band that we have that's out there playing, the brass and the percussion the way we hope to get it done. And what we find is, if you turn around and survey the audience for what music they want, right, which is what we end up having to do in this large client-based organization, we may not have the music to be able to play Enter Sandman, right? Because we've got brass and percussion and woodwind, but we're not there with an electric guitar. And so I think the biggest challenge is trying to figure out where is that singular leader who can say, we're here to see this type of music. And then we can help, coordinate the rhythm and ensure that we're delivering to the best of our ability.
So this leader you're talking about would be on the client side. This is somebody who can,
that's right,
who can get the pulse, or be the Venturi tube through which all communication flows from your side back to the client side, and they can filter and interpret. Really, you almost need like a translator, is what I've found, because each company, especially big companies, have their unique culture and language. And if you're not careful, you'll do some of the stuff that I did when I stepped into a new culture. That's good.
I like the translator part because, and in this world that is owner's rep, right? We typically will jump from client engagement to client engagement, right? And there's a ton of value in that new, fresh perspective, but the challenge ultimately becomes understanding, what is that client hoping to achieve? And it's pretty rare that you're going to have one voice, right? It's really the art behind the science on this is trying to figure out how to get the client talking to the client, right? I had a great leader when I first started at JLL, and with my engineering mind, I'm like, okay, I need to know what are my 3 to 5 things that mean success, right? And he was really, really astute, had been in it a while, and said, it's really pretty simple, right? Our job is to just get the client to talk to the client, because 9 times out of 10, they're using the JLL of the world, or even the contractors of the world, to achieve something that doesn't align with the larger vision, right?
Yeah. So are you saying that certainly that sort of thing happens unintentionally, but have you run into situations where the client is trying to use the outsourced provider, the contractor, to they're intentionally using them as leverage against somebody else in the company?
Thought I can't answer that one.
Well, it is definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah.
And
I
I think if I've seen it probably more, it happens more unintentionally, just because people get so focused on what's right in front of them, they're not looking at the big picture. But that's good. Get the client talking to the client. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So here's some advice. Tell me what you think about this. The mistake I've made in those situations is to come in and just start executing, right? Getting shit done, executing, making stuff happen. But probably the best first step when you walk into a new scenario where you're inside an organization, and this probably applies if you're an experienced person coming into a new role, probably the best thing to do is observe and build relationships and ask lots of questions first, rather than focusing on coming in and putting your thumbprint on things. This is from my experience. But what would you say? What are some of the mistakes you've seen people make when they come into a new client organization like that? And what are some of the clumsy mistakes that they make?
Yeah. I think assume competencies probably first and foremost.
Tell me, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, most folks coming into an owner's rep situation or quite honestly, right, executing on a project, assume a project is a project is a project. They'll assume a certain type of industry client is no different than the last one they spoke to or delivered work for. Right. And so to your point, you hit the ground running and you deliver on scope, schedule, budget. All the while not understanding that there are so many different factors, different success metrics that may be unique to that client, right? The one thing that it always strikes me as is pretty interesting is probably not the right word, but it strikes me as eye-opening. Is when folks come into this side of the business and think that everything within that certain client organization revolves around project delivery, right? And not taking a step back to say, well, how does this company actually make money? Because 9 times out of 10, that's what's important to that project, right? Think about any industry that you would jump into. Almost none of them, right, are going to be focused on real estate. Almost none of them are going to be focused on that project that you're delivering. That's going to be some support function. It's going to be some way that they engage it may be some way to engage their customers, but more times than not, it's there to support their business. And so delivering that project on time, on budget is important, but it's important for different reasons, right? It's not important from a margin standpoint. It's not important from a revenue standpoint, typically for that client. It's about softer things. It's about, occupant engagement. It's about satisfaction with the end product. Maybe it's around sustainability goals. Maybe it's about how clean the site was. And so that's the piece that I think is probably missing from time to time when people come into organizations, especially on the real estate side, because the folks running that real estate, they are, majority of them are very smart in our world, experienced in our world. They happen to be that translator that you were just talking about. And what we create for them by not having that awareness that they make money from financial services or power generation or manufacturing is to come in and think that the project is the end goal. That causes a conflict sometimes.
Yeah, that's really good. I spent about 2.5 years building a senior living community, and that building was a means to an end. And the company, while I worked directly for the operator, the company was primarily a healthcare operator, and just happened to have a couple of real estate and construction and development guys, but we were a means to an end. And
right.
if we didn't listen to the operations folks, we could deliver on scope, schedule, budget and spend $75 million. But if it didn't meet the operational needs, then it would have been a giant failure. So I love what you said about not knowing what the success metrics are, assuming competency, and just coming in and assuming you know what your job is. So I think one of the things I've learned as being an owner's rep is just quickly figuring out what you don't know and assuming I don't know anything, and spending a lot of time trying to figure that stuff out. So I think that's good advice for anybody moving into an organization. Ask lots of questions and go in with the posture that you don't really know, or you need to find out what the success metrics are. So let's talk about relationship mining. What does that mean to you?
Well, for me, it means, and I hate to be, kind of cliche about it, but it means everything. I've hit on relationships probably in every one of your questions here, right? But I think far too often, especially in this world, right? And I mean the broader world of, click a button and my package shows up, click a button and my car shows up. We live in this very transactional world. And I think, that is good and, all well and good now. But, if you've lived through kind of the ebb and flow of the economy, you know that, as money dries up, as funding becomes tighter, relationships matter. And it's not something that you can turn on and turn off like a faucet, right? It's something that you have to continually search for and continually work to, extract, right, from your interactions, from and building your network, right? Whether that is in what you're working on today, or what you're hoping to be a part of tomorrow, right? And so, it's probably just a spin on, make sure you're taking care of your network, make sure you are engaging outside of your core group. But I probably learned this one a little bit too late, or it's never too late, but I probably learned the value of this, a little bit later than I would have liked to have said that I was any good at it, right? I spent a lot of time early in my career very focused on results and getting it done, and not having enough time to go mine those relationships or even look for them. And I think that's what I've kind of pivoted on over the last decade or so, is to really think about how can you create partnerships, and not just for business, right? But there's partnerships for causes that you believe in. There's partnerships for, creating additional partnerships. Maybe you're the link to two really good people that will create something out on their own, right? I think about you, right? We haven't worked together in a capacity of, employee in probably a decade, right? But I know, because of the relationship that we created, and we've kind of kept up, whether it was informally or formally, that I could call on you at any time and you could do the same. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this could be from the engineering background, because I had the same experience. The first 15 years of my career were results, not focused on relationships, but it wasn't until I was actually in a business development role where I learned the value of relationships and not only the measurable value, but really the more qualitative value of relationships. It's really all you have left. When you get to the end of your life, those buildings that I built and the stuff that I did, they're not going to come to my funeral. And I really think it's probably the best part. As I look back on my career, the best part has been the relationships that I've developed, whether it's with clients I've worked with in the last few years, people I worked with during my career, people I got to know, and the people I had the opportunity to help. All of the sticks and the bricks and the projects are kind of a means to an end from a business standpoint, and from a career standpoint, I think they're just a means to an end as well, to the relationships that you get to develop out of it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's some of the aging that's taking place, Todd. But you, to your point, you start to look out and go, okay, now what was all of that worth, right? And so, as you're thinking about, that network you've created, and maybe it is all in one silo of an industry. I just, have had this revelation over the last, few years or so, is to start to expand that, because your worth and in the world is bigger than the business side of life, right? And so that's just kind of I've been spending a ton of time thinking about how do we spend our day? Maybe it's pandemic, right? Being locked up in isolation, to think about how can you come out of this and really impact the world. It's daunting and energizing all at the same time.
Yeah. So we've hinted around that we work together, and it was about 10 years ago. It was 2011, January or February. I got an email, looked at my BlackBerry back when people used BlackBerries, and there was an email from this guy named Russ at Jones Lang LaSalle. And long story short, I ended up coming to work for you, and you were my manager. We worked on an account together in this capacity as an owner's rep for a corporate real estate client. And so here's the question. You're one of two people who've been on the podcast that actually managed me. So my question for you is, how difficult was it to be Todd DeWalt's manager? And what was the most difficult situation he caused for you? And please be honest.
Well, you said managed. I don't know if that's the appropriate term. I think it was more communicated with Todd DeWalt.
You were my manager. I reported to you, right?
That's right. That part's true. But I think, obviously people that listen to you will not be shocked by me saying you're one of the straightest shooters I've ever met, and certainly one of the straightest shooters I've ever had on my team. There were times where I literally wondered if you were a robot. But having said that, I would say you got us out of far more trouble than you ever got us into. You came in and took over the biggest project we had on the books at the time, and it was in mid-flight, and really kind of turned the ship around, right? But if you're going to press me on a challenging one, the one that comes to mind was, I think it was one of your first hires that you made on the team, right? I was this new leader. I had never been to Cincinnati in my entire life. I knew no one there. I'd actually not even sure I knew it was that close to Kentucky, but I figured that part out. But my job was to organize this high-performing team, right? And to your point, I found you, which was a great first start. I think I found you on Craigslist. if I have to be honest, or something like that. I can't remember where I got your email address. No, you came highly referenced from some of the folks I think you worked with at JLL prior to us, prior to my time, right? So, you know, we get you on, we're working really, really hard, right? We're basically restarting the entire project team in Cincinnati. And again, I just gone through this hiring blitz and found you, and you're hiring your first one, and go through all the protocols, and yeah, we got good candidates, and this is the right candidate, and yeah, we can afford them, and client approves it, right? That's one thing that we didn't talk about earlier, but yeah, client actually had to approve it. Big project is now moving forward. We're getting this person on board. Like, the sky's the limit, right? I'm thinking, man, this robot is amazing. Can't believe we got lucky. So I go to Cincinnati. We take the new person out. You and I do, right? I'm sure you remember where this is going. I could have been clouded by judgment, but I'm thinking, wow, this is really going to work out. Like, I may not have to touch the Midwest again for a long, long time, because I think Todd's got the project going. We got this great team building. So I'm like doing backflips all the way from downtown Cincinnati to the airport, and I sit down in my seat and I get a text, and I'm like, okay, wonder who this is. And it's Todd, and it says, in very, very short words, give me a call when you can. They quit. It was literally the text message you sent me as I'm on the plane getting ready to fly home. And my awesome meter pegged from as high as you can get it to pretty much empty in a matter of a minute.
Yes.
Right. That our new hire, I think, quit, after one day, but maybe not even after one day.
It was actually, the day was to start at 8 a.m. And I got the message. I remember where I was. I was backing out of my driveway at 7 a.m. and I was feeling good too. And I got this message saying it wasn't the right fit. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. We went through this lengthy process, multiple interviews, and they quit before day one. Like, how could this possibly be? Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that was the challenging piece, but I don't know that it was, I think it was probably the right decision on their part, right? Because it's, in some instances, you don't know until you know. Being on the owner's rep side, like we talked about earlier, right? It's project management, it's construction management, and yeah, that should translate regardless of client. But all clients are a little different, right?
Yeah, it's I've worked with people who've come over from the construction side, from architecture, interior design, mechanical engineering, and there's some overlap from those worlds to the owner's rep world, but it's a really unique animal. Fascinating, but unique. So one thing I'll say is, yes, that person quit at T-minus like 1 hour, but within 48 hours, we had a candidate on board. Now, I don't know how successful that ended up being, but we did recover nicely, and we had somebody else. So now there has to be, right, so that was one problem I caused you. I have a feeling you probably had some other phone calls or emails from the client that were caused by me, either because this DeWalt guy wouldn't share his calendar with everybody on the account. He ejected or evicted unnecessary people, or people he thought were unnecessary, from project meetings. What else? There had to be something else where I ruffled some feathers. Yeah. Anything come to mind?
That's good. I actually had forgotten about the whole calendar fiasco. That's a good one.
Calendar gate. That was
Calendar gate.
Yeah. So background, this at this time, was this Lotus Notes or Microsoft Outlook?
No, yeah, I think we were all on Outlook,
Okay.
but we were on the client's
Yeah.
machines, right?
Right.
And their corporate culture was that everybody from the CEO to the bottom of the organization shared their calendars. And they shared the doctor's visits and the grandmother's birthdays
Mm-hmm.
to project calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Todd, this is probably a good representation or time to circle back to assumed competency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I actually think it was a little bit of you coming in, and maybe we would call it stubbornness. I don't know. Todd, depends on
Yes.
how you want to go with that.
I would definitely call it hard-headedness, stubbornness. Yes.
Yeah. But also the client, was a little sensitive to JLL coming in, right? And so it became a battle of will at that point. But yeah, I do recall a couple phone calls about, how am I going to know when to attend the call? He's kicked me off the call, first of all, and now I can't find it on his calendar.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Remind me how that ended up. What did you end up doing? I've forgotten.
So the culture at this client was, everybody shared their calendar, and that was just crazy talk to me. And I was more of a, probably still am to some degree. It's like, you know what, I'll let you know. It's on a need to know basis. So that share your calendar thing was completely foreign to me. And shortly after getting there, people would send me an email and say, hey, share your calendar with me. I'm like, why the hell would I do that? I didn't understand what that meant. So this was a cultural norm that was abnormal to me. And so also their cultural norm was to not contact that person directly, but to go to their boss. So that's why they would contact Russ and say, hey, can you tell Todd to share his calendar? And Russ would contact me, and I would be like, why the hell would I do that? And we got into this battle of the wills. And eventually, I'm pretty sure we came to some compromise where I shared my calendar but kept everything private so they couldn't see all the details. Right. But I'd like to think I'm a little bit more cooperative at this point, but maybe not. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing what age and experience will do to our hard-headedness, right?
I hope so. That's what my wife is counting on, that things will improve. All right. So I was not, I like to think of myself, I don't think I'm a good employee. I think I am probably not. I've had bad experiences with managers in some cases, but I enjoyed working with you. I thought our time together was fun. We did a lot of fun stuff. And some people say people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. That was certainly not the reason that I left that situation. So I think the reason I left was everything but you, to be honest, Russ. It was a good time.
Oh, well, if you could see me, you would see, the tear coming out of my eye. I wanted to make sure we got this reconciliation on recorded.
That's right. It's a beautiful moment. It really is a beautiful reunion. Right. Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's transition out of this and talk about failure or apparent failure. One of my favorite questions to ask is, how has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success? Or another way of asking this is, what is a favorite failure of yours? Yeah,
well, there's certainly not a lack of them. So I had to really think about which one to pull out. But, I'd say the one that to me is kind of pivotal in me getting back into design, construction, and real estate happened when I was about 23. Right. And to take you back, I was pretty similar to you, very headstrong, and kind of knew what I wanted and where I was headed. I feel like since the time I could remember anything, so I was going to go be an architect. I was going to NC State, and that's what I was going to do. Along the way, that kind of shifted a little bit, but ended up getting a mechanical engineering degree, coming out of school, and so at that point, my life's mission was over. Right, I had got this really fancy degree. I was making more money than I'd ever thought was possible. Right, which really wasn't it wasn't that much money, but it was an entry job in an engineering field, which was at the time I might even be able to go buy my own car. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm on the trajectory, skyrocket trajectory, and everything from here on out is just gravy. And I'm working as a field engineer in this cable installation company, right? And the kind of grand plan of that, not to go into too much detail, is they're manufacturing cable. They get young engineers out so they understand how it works and gets installed, and hopefully they'll help grow the business as a product owner long term. So the next 40 years of my life's mapped out. I'm set, right? That's about 2001. So I don't know if everybody can kind of pull back 20 years ago, but that's when the .com bubble just burst, right? And all of a sudden, fiber was not quite as economically feasible, or the trajectory for it getting into your home wasn't, has extended, right? And so I get laid off at 23 years old. Got a wife, got a kid on the way, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like, what's going on? And that was about the moment. I had always, had a high work ethic thanks to my parents and the family and friends that helped raise me. But that was the point where I really started to go, okay, well, layoff, baby on the way, family to support. I really need to get my shit together, right? And so I started thinking about, what do I want to do? What does my past suggest I should be doing? What is my future? What's an upswing in the future, right? What are the maybe layoff proof roles that are out there? And everything just kept centering back on mechanical engineering, mechanical design. And so I must have sent out 50 or 60 resumes and beat on, this was a time when you're, typing on a desktop computer and waiting on dial up to kick in. Right. But I'm just blasting out as many resumes, cold calls, just hustling to find that next thing. And what it turned into was, then I connected up with this small consulting firm that was so focused on sustainability. And at the time, LEED was this new, not really well thought through thing. And so I got into that world, and that helped spur me into thinking about, okay, project management. Maybe I want to, help design, not just design the projects and, in an environmentally friendly way, or for large scale corporate clients, but maybe I want to run the projects. And then so I moved into that space. And then from that, it just kept kind of compounding on itself. Right. And, mixing a little luck and I would say a lucky relationship, right? That I had, or a relationship that luckily I continued to mine, got me into JLL. And so that failure at 23 could have really rocked our world. My wife wasn't working. We had the baby, all the expenses along with that, right? All of a sudden income was not coming in. But for me, it kind of removed the distractions and helped me focus in on, okay, where am I really going to be my best self? And, I think that's probably common in a lot of people's failure stories, Todd, right? Like, that's that moment of clarity of, what really matters, and how am I going to, get into your fight or flight mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to make sure that we survive? And, I'm lucky in a story of not just survival, but really are thriving. And so yeah, that's what I point back to.
Yeah. I would say two of the most pivotal times in my career, three actually, have been when I was laid off. Two were when I was laid off. One was when I was unceremoniously fired. Like, your job ends as soon as we hang up the phone. Fired. And yeah, those were the biggest fork in the road moments for me.
Yeah.
And that's, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, do you chart any different kind of trajectory based on how that ended, right? Like, did the layoff send you one direction and the unceremoniously fired situation send you in a different one?
No, they really sent me all along the same path. It was like the first layoff sent me from the world of commercial construction and real estate development into the world of sewer rehabilitation in 2010, different recession. So that long story, serendipitous, weird situation, and I ended up in the sewer rehab industry. And then I got fired after 6 months from that role, and like, well, what the hell do I do now? And this was 2010. Still in the depths of the recession as far as the commercial building construction world went, and probably housing too, residential and construction. And I ended up working for a small company doing some consulting work. And I ended up at that company. Eventually I ended up learning the stuff that I teach now. And if I was not at that company, I probably would have never started the podcast back in 2014. And I would not have been forced into this crucible where I had to learn how to solve cash flow problems and how to eliminate chaos and how to build systems. So yeah, looking back on it now, it's easy to say, yeah, 2010, when I got laid off, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. But in the moment, it felt really scary and really bad. But yeah, in a way, things just worked out. And even though I tried to make things happen, and I was definitely a fan of hustling and trying to make stuff happen. And no matter what I did, it was like I was on this trajectory, and nothing I did would help change it. Nothing I did would speed it up, slow it down. It was just this organic trajectory that I was on. And I would have been better just to sit back and enjoy the ride. But that feels pretty irresponsible sometimes. But getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, like, for people, and I'm one, right, very anxious about planning and maybe even over planning, to think that, some of that's just waste, right? To your point, to just enjoy the ride. Bad things are going to happen to good people. And if you've cultivated a strong enough support system around you, right, that doesn't necessarily mean the end of things for you. You can still achieve some really, really great and amazing change in your life by having those experiences. So it's just interesting to hear you say that both of them kind of led you to the same place. Cool.
Yeah, it was. I read an old essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he said something. His exact words were, "We are begirt by natural laws that execute themselves." And I had to look up what begirt means, but it means we're surrounded by natural laws that execute themselves. And he said, he went on to say that man is like a ship in a river, and you're bound on two sides of the river. It's even bound on one side trying to go upstream, but in one direction you are completely unbound, and it is just free sailing all the way to the ocean. And he said, that's how people are. And your job is just to figure out which direction are you supposed to go, and then just go in that direction. I'm beginning to realize it's so much simpler than I used to think. It doesn't have to be filled with anxiety. There's just a lot of stress and frustration, irritation, and sleepless nights that are just unnecessary. And if you just go with the flow and enjoy the ride, probably the one thing I picked up a couple of years ago, 4 words, however many words, detach from the outcome, 4 words, detach from the outcome. Life gets a lot simpler when you detach from the outcome and focus on the process, focus on the relationships, focus on the people around you, focus on the inputs, giving, and detach from the outcome, because the outcome's not in your control, but all the inputs are. Yeah. All right. So let's back out of that rabbit hole. I was going to ask you, well, how many people would you say you have managed in your team? Well, how many do you manage right now on your team? Just ballpark.
Yeah, today it seems about 15, 20.
Okay. Yep. And how many people would you say you've managed over the course of your career?
Oh, hundreds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is a red flag that tells you it's time to have a talk with an employee? Maybe an often overlooked red flag, or some early leading indicator that you've found that tells you, Russ, it's probably time to talk to Todd about calendar sharing, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that one's an easy example is around the client part, right? But in this day and age, it has become much more difficult, right? Gone, at least for me, are the days of running into that person in the break room, or catching them as we're walking to our parking space together, and really just kind of getting that body language, right? Because most of the stuff today that I engage with my team is all online. It's Zoom, it's phone calls, and it's not always sharing the screen, right? So I think, I would have said engagement, and it would have meant something different, 14 months ago. But I also think it's still that, it's just in a different way, right? And so, now you have to be even more in tune with voice, right? More in tune with how someone, responds to how you're doing. I'll tell you a couple of things that I've done to try and, get in front of that, because it's just more difficult now than ever, is, having weekly stand-ups, even with smaller teams, right? So I may have a Monday morning call. Instead of being with the full team, it's with, 2 of them, right? And I may have 5 of those on a Monday. But it really breaks it down in a smaller setting, so that, one, they're building trust within each other, but 2, you're getting really the full story, right? It's so easy to say, how you doing? I'm doing okay. How you doing? I'm doing okay. But especially right now, if it's in a virtual environment, you got to dig a little bit deeper, and establish that trust, because it's really easy to click an email off, and that be the measure of a result, right? But that's not telling the full story about how engaged somebody is in the work, and that's what ultimately, in my opinion, that's what ultimately turns into a red flag, into a full-blown issue. Is someone engaged in the work? Are they participatory in the vision of where we're going, or are they just going through the motions?
So what's a better question to ask than how are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know if I've found that question yet, Todd. But what I try and lead with is examples for them, right? So when they ask me how I'm doing, I open up and get pretty vulnerable, right? Hey, I'm tired. I, stayed up doing helping a 14-year-old do their math homework last night until 10:30, and I'm probably going to cut out at 2 p.m. to just kind of recharge, but I'll be back online at 3:30, right? And I think by showing folks, especially as a leader, right, is showing them your willingness to be vulnerable and the fact that you're a human and that you're not a robot. It makes it easy. It makes it maybe it makes it more makes you more approachable, and it makes that person feel at ease to share really how they're doing versus the small talk of let's get on with the work, right?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. All right, last question. What is something that you believe to be true about business that some people might think is unconventional, perhaps even a little crazy?
Yeah. So I spent my whole entire life in competition. I feel like, right? From the time I was little in sports to growing up in school to fighting for jobs to, creating opportunities, driving revenue. And I think what I've learned recently, and again, this may, I talked earlier, this may not be crazy, right? But I think it's important, is that coopetition is far more important than competition, right? So, and what I mean by that is making sure that, you don't look at your competition, let's say your peer group in the industry, your peer group in that market, as direct competition, and ensure that you think about it as an opportunity to cooperate, right? We work with our direct competition every single day. JLL, we want to win for sure. We want to grow in the right way for sure. But we also recognize that we have a shared client, and it's in our combined best interest to service them consistently, to bring them the best that our partnership can bring. So are there ways that you can share resources to be more efficient? There are ways that you can share lessons learned to be more repeatable. Again, I'm not suggesting collusion or anything like that, but really, think about your competition as really your co-op, right? And are there ways that your strengths can overlap with some of their weaknesses to really create value that you both can benefit from? And so thinking about that in more of a win-win situation versus a win-lose, I think is something that's incredibly important, and probably not, maybe it's not that obvious, right? If people are in that fight every single day, certainly when you're scrapping together a small business, you want to win as much as you can, right? But I would just encourage you to think about, are there opportunities to do more cooperation and coopetition as opposed to really trying to put those win-lose situations out there.
So coopetition, is that the word?
Yeah, I can't say that I made that up on my own. It's kind of lingered throughout my career at JLL. So it's a term that, again, think about it, right? It's we typically are there are times where JLL is part of the business with a client, and our direct competition is the other part. So they may be transacting the dirt that JLL is then going to come support building the building on, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a natural, coopetition. There's a natural cooperation, really, right, that has to happen there. And I think that applies throughout the industry, right? Even in a small business situation where you're hunting, you're eating what you kill, right? The more that you can create efficiencies even if it's working with your competition. That's having that long range growth mindset that I think at the end will grow revenue, make your clients happier, and make your business more successful.
Yeah. I was sitting outside a restaurant in Covington, Kentucky, which is just south of Cincinnati, Ohio. And this is an area that's being recovered. It's Recov. It's recovering Covington. There's a nice boutique hotel, bars, restaurants, et cetera. And I was talking to the owner of one of the restaurants, and I was surprised to find out that they're all friends. They're friends with the wine bar across the street, the pub down the hall, all these people who on the surface would appear to be direct competitors. They're actually friends, and they'll refer each other. They'll share resources because they're really all in it together. And the more people who come to Covington, the more likely more people are going to come. So even though, it doesn't behoove anybody to badmouth the competition. It's in everybody's best interest that everybody who comes to Covington has a good experience. So they'll come back and they'll tell their friends. And it's probably the same thing like in my business. I want people who work with a business coach to have a good experience, because there are some bad ones out there and they're making us look bad. So I don't want that negative stigma. So the more people who have a business coach or recognize the value of it, the more people will have a business coach. And the more people who decide to remodel their homes, the better experience they're going to have, the more people are going to remodel their homes. If you zoom out far enough, you and your competitors are really all in the same space. So like in the JLL world, if the word gets out there that outsourced real estate services don't work, that's bad. But if they do work, regardless of who they're working with, it's a good thing. So I like that. Coopetition is much better than competition. Well, this has been great stuff. Typically, I would ask you to share a website where people can go find out about you. But if people want to find out about Jones Lang LaSalle, or if they want to connect with you, should they even try to connect with you? First of all, if so, where's a good place to do that? And where can they learn more about Jones Lang LaSalle?
Yeah, I think JLL is probably the best place is just go to our website, right? It's a global company, but you could start at us.jll.com for anything you need to know around the services we provide, the industries we support. Even if you're interested in research, right? Like what's going on with this whole return to office? When are people returning to office? Is it going to be different? It's a great place for, like I said, for research. As for me, I think, the easiest place is probably LinkedIn. At this point in time, I'm not sure the JLL email server could handle, the vast audience that you've got and and how interesting this podcast was for them. But I would say just, hit me up on LinkedIn and we can go from there.
Sounds good. Great stuff, man. Well, if you're ever in the Cincinnati area, you absolutely need to let me know. If I'm ever in Charlotte, I'll do the same. So this was fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to share. It's been great.
Yeah, Todd, I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to you joining me down here in the Queen City one day.
Right on. Thanks, Russ. If you're tired of the pain of delayed payment or non-payment situations, here's some good news. You can take control and get paid on time for your hard work with Approval. Approval is a payment management tool for milestone-based projects that allows you to get paid faster. Get started today. Visit withapproval.com to see more and click Request Demo to get in touch and see how it can help your business. That's withapproval.com. There you go. Hope you got something out of that. Be sure to pick one thing that you want to implement. What is the one thing you're going to take away from this and actually make it show up in your career or in your life? Is it relationship mining? Is it looking at some of the assumptions that you've made? I think the term that Russ used was assuming competency, or not knowing what the success metrics are. If you're in a new role, might be a good time to pause and ask some questions and not just try to execute and deliver results. But be sure to connect with Russ on LinkedIn. Follow him. He shares a lot of great stuff on there. As always, I appreciate the ratings and the reviews. If you could take a moment and leave a rating and or a review for this podcast, that would mean a lot to me, and it would help get the word out there to the rest of the interwebs. And if there's somebody that you think would get some value out of this, then just feel free to share this podcast directly, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, whatever the case may be, whatever works for you. As always, lots of resources available for you at buildermasterclass.com, eliminating chaos on your projects, streamlining your change order process, streamlining communication on projects, getting paid for estimates. One of the drums I've been beating this year. If you're a remodeling contractor, custom home builder, or even a light commercial GC, you need to end the practice of free estimates. And I recommend you go to buildermasterclass.com/script to get a free training video where you might convince yourself that it's in everybody's best interest, especially yours, to end the practice of free estimates. As always, thank you so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt. Let me know how I can help you over at constructionleadingedge.com or buildermasterclass.com, and I'll see you next time. A happy customer isn't just revenue, it's a marketing opportunity. From Google to Yelp to Facebook, join the more than 30,000 small businesses already using GoSite to request, respond, and manage reviews, all from one easy-to-use dashboard. GoSite puts the power back in the hands of you, the construction business owner, with a mobile app that transforms how you run your business by making it easier for customers to find, book, pay, and review your services online. Get started for free at gosite.com/podcast. That's GOSITE.com/podcast.